Alright guys, it's now Monday night, just coming up to 7 p.m. and we are back on the 1968 Triumph TR250 project. I've got about an hour or so to play around out here tonight, so we've got a couple of objectives we'd like to accomplish. The first being the trying to get the passenger side fitment a little bit better down at the sill. It's sticking out a little bit there, too much to my liking, so I think we can get that to look a little bit better. So we're going to play around and try to get this fender adjusted a little bit better. Second objective is to get the Surrey backlight cinched down. I've got 5 fasteners on this backlight. None of them are tightened down, so I'd like to see what that looks like once I've got all the fasteners in and tightened, and see if I can bring this down to the rear deck a little bit more. So it is sitting up fairly high right now, so now that we've got the hardtop section on as far as alignment is concerned, we can work on cinching the rear of this top down to the deck. Alright, just starting to work on the front fender to sill fitment, and I just wanted to give a bit of a shout out to Wera Tools. These are my 2 newest friends. I've been using these pretty much mostly exclusively for the last 2 weeks on the final assembly of the TR250, and they have been awesome tools to work with. Really nice. So just a quick shout out to Wera Tools, Zyklop mini ratchet on the right hand side, and the Zyklop 1/4 inch on the left hand side. Fantastic. Alright guys, welcome back now. Tuesday evening after work, and to tell you the truth, I didn't get a lot done yesterday, very little actually. I did attempt to make the front fender fitment a little bit better on the passenger side, and I think it's a little bit better, at least. I don't know if you can tell, but that is definitely looking a little bit better than it was. Every little bit helps, so we're going to be happy with that. We're going to have to live with that. It's not too bad, so we'll continue on. From there I went and started working on the backlight fixing, and that didn't go so well. They have these little J hooks here on the back. This is an aftermarket Surrey top. This is made of fiberglass, not of the aluminum as the originals were. I'd love to have one of those, but they're pretty rare and very expensive. So we've got an aftermarket one here that's attached at the rear with these J clips. And I had an issue with this one over here wanting to pop off. There's a sort of a metal bar that's molded into the bottom of the backlight, where that J hook sort of clips onto and then pops down through the holes that are on the back of the rear deck here. And that one J clip, J bolt, just wanted to keep popping off. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for some upgraded J bolts, and I may do some modifications to heat them and bend them so they fit around those steel bars on the bottom of this top a little bit more tightly, so when I pull it down closer to the rear deck of the car, it doesn't pop off of that bar that's molded into the fiberglass on the bottom. So we are going to have to do a little bit of shopping for that, so I'm not going to touch this for the moment. I do have some news though. Alright, here's the news of the day. This morning before work, I managed to go to a place near me called Planet 6 Parts, and they specialize in used parts for Triumph TR6s. And I had talked to them a week or so ago about used glass, if they had any in stock. So they had a pile of glass there. They probably had about 12 pieces, and I managed to go through the pile and pick out 3 that seemed like they might be workable. So I brought them home with me. I've got 3 new pieces, and I brought one of my original pieces just to make sure that the glass was the same size as what I was picking up, because I know there are earlier glass shapes I think are slightly different. But anyway, we've got 3 new panes to work with to see if we can get them polished and cleaned up a little bit before we take them to the tinter. So that's the first piece of news. Second piece of news is, while I was there, they actually do sell some new parts. So I asked him if he had a hood popper, and he did, as a matter of fact, have a brand new hood popper. So we've got one of those. So now that I've got this, I'm guaranteed to find the one that I've been looking for the past couple of weeks. A couple other pieces of news that you might like to know about. Number one is that my rims actually did arrive at my US postal box today and are now winging their way up to my Canadian box. So that's good. Those should be available for pickup by the end of the week. So that's good news. Another piece of good news is the fact that I went ahead and broke down and bought a new set of bumpers, front and rear, for the car. So those should be arriving within the next, I would say, next 3 weeks or so. I bought the polished stainless steel ones from Vietnam. There's a couple of vendors out there. I think there's one called Bumper World and one called Harrington. So they get good reviews actually on their bumpers, so I took a bit of a chance. They are, I'm going to say, significantly cheaper than the ones from the big three vendors, so we'll see what the quality is like, although I've heard reports that the quality is good. So we will see for ourselves firsthand when those arrive, hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So there's the news update, so I guess it's time for me to start working. So I think what I'll do is I will again break out the polish and possibly some fine sandpaper and see how these windows look after they're cleaned up. They're definitely going to be better, I think, than what I had on the car, so we're definitely going to be moving forwards regardless of how these actually clean up. The ones that came off the car had some pretty severe chipping on the edges of them as well. As far as I know, the windows that I picked up, the 3 that I picked up this morning, don't have any large chips, so that's a good place to start, and we'll move forward from there. All right, Wednesday morning, and we're just coming up to 8 a.m. And I thought I'd drop my windows off at the tint shop today and hopefully be able to get them back in a few days so we can get them in the doors and back on the car. Hopefully this weekend. That would be great, but we will see how busy the tint shop is and when we can get them back. All right, guys, we are back from the tint shop, and the windows are still clear. Yeah, the tint shop was pretty busy and they weren't going to be able to get to these until next week, and I was really hoping to work with these this weekend. It's a long weekend up here, being Labor Day on the Monday. So I asked them how difficult it would be to do these at home by myself, and they said, well, it shouldn't be too difficult because it's a flat piece of glass. So they provided me with the material and they gave me a quick tutorial on how to work with this stuff. So I'm going to attempt to do this at home. So this is the same grade tint as what I have on the backlight. Same material. They actually did the backlight for me, so they've just provided me with the same film. And they've given me a rubber squeegee as well to help out with things. And then they've basically, like I said, given me a tutorial on what to do. So we are going to attempt to tint these windows at home myself. So there's going to be a bit of a learning curve here. They've given me 2 extra sheets to work with if I screw up, and if I don't get it to my satisfaction, they just told me to bring the car in once the glass is installed in the door, and they will do it for me then. So anyway, let's give this a shot. We'll see if we can do home tinting and see if it turns out good enough for me, let's say that. All right, so I've given the glass a pretty good cleaning with Windex, and I'm happy with where I'm at as far as that's concerned. So the next step is to measure the film and apply it to the outside of the glass. Now there's a coating on one side of the film, so we're going to leave the coating on until we're ready to transfer it to the inside of the window where it's applied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, like I said, measure it out, and we're also going to trim it out. So I've got my razor blade standing by, I've got some tape standing by. So once we apply that, measure it out, trim it out, then we can then peel off the backing piece and then stick it to the other side of the glass where it's going to be affixed with some soapy water, and then you basically squeegee all the soapy water out and get all the air bubbles out, etc. from below. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to go for it and try to get the first piece measured and cut out on the exterior of the glass. Alright, we've got that piece trimmed out, and I've lifted about 1/8 of an inch around the exterior the whole way around. And I wasn't too concerned about finishing the bottom very squarely, because obviously you don't see that above about this line here. So anything below here you don't see. So I'm not too concerned about that. So next step is obviously to clean the back side of this again once, and then we're going to take the clear outer layer off of this, wet the window down with some soap and water, and then we're going to reposition this on the opposite side, and we'll squeegee all the soap and water out from underneath and let it dry, hopefully. Alright, now that we have the door glass all squared away, we're going to start working on getting the rest of the door components together. I brought the newly painted hinges out from the dining room, and we're going to start assembling parts here on the table to see what we have to work with, and then we'll refurb what needs to be refurbed, and we'll go from there. Alright, when you put it out on a table on display, it's quite a bit of stuff that is used to put the doors back together or the door components back together. So starting with the hinges, and then we have all the door internals here, including the striker plates. So these need to be refinished, so I'll probably end up doing this fairly soon to get these into paint and get them drying so I can handle those. These window channels here on both sides need to be relined. So there's a little bit of a trick to doing that, and I'll share that with you once we get to that point. Mechanisms, obviously, for winding up and down the windows. The least favorite job I think I have on any TR6 or 250 are these inner and outer waste seals. They are an absolute pain in my mind, whether the doors are on or off the car. The previous owner of the car actually used little screws, and you can see he's drilled holes in the old seals, and I've kept these for reference because obviously there are mating holes in the doors, the metal parts of the doors, where you fix these with small screws. So I might go back in the same direction because that I think would be easier than applying the clips. We have the more riveting to do with the trim for the doors. The driver's side's seen better days. It's got a few little dents here and there in there, but we're not going to worry about that too much. We'll polish them up like we did the other pieces, and we'll go ahead and utilize them. Lots of new parts, everything from a new inside handle kit, window cranks and handles, door lock fitting kits. We got a new door mirror, new door handles, new check straps, gaskets, the clips, etc., etc. So we're pretty much ready to go on the doors. I'm ready to utilize finally my TR250 door fitting kit. This is from Grove Components in the UK, so it's a complete stainless kit and all packaged out into little into individual packages. So I'm looking forward to using these. It's always nice to have a new fasteners putting stuff together. So we'll utilize these shortly to get the doors back together, and of course we'll take you along the way. Anyway, first job, like I mentioned, is probably going to be strip down those striker plates, so I'll probably go ahead and do that later this afternoon and get those into fake cadmium. Alright, started working on these door latches. I think I might have called them strikers before. I think the strikers are what's on the car, and these are the latches. So the door latches, they are cleaning up okay just with a quick wire brush, so definitely looks better than that. Pretty dirty on the back side, so we'll clean them up a bit more, and then we'll get them into a quick coat of paint, let them dry at least overnight before we handle them. But we have lots of other stuff to work on in the meantime. Alright, while the door latches are drying after their first coat of clear coat, we're going to start working on the window channels for the passenger side. So the first thing I'm going to do is just clean these up, and I'm going to take all of the old remaining felt bits out of the channels. It's kind of just hanging on there for dear life. We'll clean them up just as best as possible. So we're going to use any means necessary, so scrapers, X-Acto knife or razor blades, wire brushes, etc. So we'll get those cleaned up as best as possible before moving on to the next step, which is going to be relining these. Incidentally, if you don't want to go to this trouble, I believe the channels are available to be purchased. I think I even have some downstairs, to be honest with you. But I usually like to use the originals unless they're too far gone. So the channels that come don't have the actual hardware on here, so you have to rivet all this stuff back on. So it's quite a bit of work to make the other channels work anyway, so I prefer to work with what we've got. Alright, so this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to get this old felt or this old lining material out of here, and it'll be left with a nice clean surface so we can adhere the new Velcro to it. So just continue on until you get this channel cleaned out the best that you can. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes a little bit more difficult up in these areas here, but make sure you get the bottom and the sides cleaned out as best as possible. Alright guys, we've got the channels pretty well cleaned out now, as you can see, and we've wiped them out with rubbing alcohol so they're nice and clean. We've also just peened these rivets over again. They were a little bit loose, so all I've taken is just a punch and a hammer, and we've tightened those rivets up versus replacing them. So that's worked well. I'm going to do the same for the driver's side now. This is the passenger side. And then we'll get ready to reline these channels. While I'm over here at the bench, I thought I would give you a quick update on this door catch, latch, whatever you want to call it, the thing that sits on the end of the door. So fake cadmium plated, they look pretty good. I've got a couple of coats of clear on here as well, so those look much better than they did. So those are ready to go back on the car. Let's get back to relining the channels. Alright, so here's what we're going to use to line the channels. So this is an industrial strength Velcro. This happens to be white. You can obviously get the black. If I had the black, I'd be using that, but for some reason I have the white. So we're going to trim this up to fit in the channels. We're going to use a plastic tool to press it in and make sure it's fastened. But that's what we're going to do to line the channels. So I'll bring you back once I've got one done. Alright guys, let's try to line one of these channels together. So here's what I do. And again, there's a couple of different ways to do this. So you may be trying to, or you may try to want to sort of fold this into the channel, something like this. That will not work, or it doesn't work for me anyway. The adhesive is too strong. You'll end up getting ripples. You'll end up not getting it formed correctly to the bottom of the channel. So my preference is to actually cut strips and lay the strips in. It's a little bit easier, and particularly when you start getting towards this end, it gets a little dicey if you don't actually do the strip methodology, as I'm going to do. It gets a little difficult to tuck it in neatly if you're trying to do just a folded strip. So let's go ahead and we're going to cut strips of this. Now, I haven't measured the width of the strips, but I'm going to say it's going to be about 1/8 of an inch wide, somewhere around there. Let's say probably 5 millimeters, somewhere around there. Maybe a little bit bigger, maybe 6 millimeters. Anyway, just basically roughly, you want to fit it to obviously fit in the bottom of the channel here. So you're making it, you want to make it that width, the entire length here. I've cut the strips to length already, so we're just going to trim them down with a good pair of scissors, sharp pair of scissors. Now you can try to do this with an X-Acto knife or a razor blade, but the backing on this industrial Velcro is pretty stiff, so you've really kind of got to go through it twice with a razor blade, and that makes it a little bit more difficult. So I find that just cutting strips with a sharp pair of scissors seems to work well for me. So I'll just go ahead and I'll cut along here. And as you notice, I didn't really measure it out. I don't really think it's that important. You just wanted to get it to fit into that channel in the bottom. And then you're going to create 2 strips for the sides, the same dimensions as you're doing for the bottom here. So we're just cutting along. Like I said, you need a sharp pair of industrial, scissors, or something that's going to cut through this fairly easily. The adhesive wants to sort of grab the scissors, so you need a nice sharp pair, that's for sure, and something that's going to be big enough for, I've got big hands, so I've got scissors with big handholds. So anyway, we're just going to cut our 3 strips, and then we'll come back when we start to tuck them in. Alright, we've got our 3 strips cut, and again, this is the soft side, or the fuzzy side of the Velcro, and again, this could be black as well, could be any color you want. I'm using a glazing stick to actually help me stick this in the bottom of the channel and up the side. So a nice plastic stick, you can find something that's equivalent, piece of wood or pencil or something, but this works really well in this application. So I just actually got this from Moss, part number 37-0025. I find these have a sort of a million uses around the garage, so I've got a couple of these. So we're just going to start by, this is probably the hardest part of the project, is actually peeling that backing, or finding the corner on the back of this to be able to peel this backing off. So we'll probably struggle a little bit to do that. Actually, this one's not too bad. So there you go. So we'll just peel the backing off a little of the ways down, and we're going to start at the top end, and we're just going to lay this in on the bottom of the channel, and we're going to kind of hold it tight. Now, it might be a good idea to make these strips a little bit long. That's way you've got a little bit of a tail to hang on to either way to be able to stretch and pull. I've probably made this a little bit short. I've actually made it exactly to the length, but if you make it a little bit longer, it'll probably be a little bit easier to manipulate this strip. So we're just going to lay this strip in, and we're going to push it down with our glazing stick here in a minute after we lay it in. And the difficult part, of course, is that the adhesive is going to want to stick right away wherever you touch. So you've just kind of got to work it out. So we've got that in there nicely in the bottom of the channel. And it's going to be difficult for you to see this, but you can see we've got that piece started in there. Okay. So all we're going to do is we're going to work our way along, and as we work our way along, we're just going to remove that adhesive backing as we tuck it into the channel. So we'll go ahead and we'll put that first strip in, and we'll bring you back. Alright, we have our first adhesive strip in, and this is where this comes in handy, this glazing stick. You can sort of just run it along and make sure that it's adhering to the bottom of this channel well, and that's actually turned out really perfectly. So the next step is obviously we're going to lay on the side channels now. So we've got, again, the adhesive strips, the Velcro strips ready to go for the sides. So again, we'll start at the top here. We'll just lay them down on the inside, press them against the sides, and we'll run our stick the entire length along to make sure that they're adhered to the channel properly. It's okay if they actually come up a little bit above the side of the channel. That's not going to be a problem. Actually, it's probably not a bad thing. But if you're anal, you might want to trim them down if they're a little bit too long. But I would just leave them personally. So anyway, let's lay those side ones in, and we'll bring you back. Alright guys, a quick look at the finished product. So nicely lined, looks a lot better than what it did when we first started. So this will keep the glass from rattling inside the door, and it'll be a nice smooth up and down transition of the window. If you wanted to check to make sure that you've got that felt in there, or this Velcro in there securely enough and that the window can still move, you can always test it. I've actually got a spare window over there that I'm just going to make sure that this works on before we go to the bother of installing it in the car and finding out that it's too tight. I've never had any issues with that in the past, so I'm sure these are going to work out perfectly, but if you wanted to check, you could do that before you actually go to install them. So those are ready to go, or this one's ready to go. We'll do the other three, and then we will move on to assembling the doors. Alright, the next thing I thought I'd look at is this little piece here, which is, I believe, called the door rest. The door rest will actually, or the bottom of the door will actually sit on this little pad here, which used to be a kind of a foam pad, but obviously that's disintegrated and no longer here. So I believe these are called spreader bars. They're on the bottom door glass, and they attach to the frames, and I'm not sure if they spread them or keep them from stretching, so I'm not sure if it's a spreader or a keeper. But they go in there. They're more of like a rattle trap. I've seen guys actually rubberize the end of these. I think Ed Holland, if you've looked at his Bullfire website on his TR6, I believe he rubber dipped these to keep them from rattling, so that's not a bad idea. But anyway, we're going to come up with something to fix this. I'm thinking possibly a Scotch-Brite pad, folded, maybe. Anyway, we'll see. Let me pull this out. So that old felt piece was held on by these two little specialty fasteners. They're just little, almost like a cotter pin with a head on it, and they're just crimped over. So I've uncrimped them with the hopes I might be able to reutilize these. Let me see if I can get them out. And so that's just holding down that old piece of felt there. So I'm surprised that these are not rusted. So there's the old piece of felt, and there's the bracket. Probably clean this up, give it a quick coat of paint. And it looks like actually I've got a broken off stud here. You notice that? So I'm going to have to drill that out and retap that to be able to reutilize this. So we'll go ahead and we'll fix this and figure out something for this piece. Sometimes you get lucky with a little bit of heat. I managed to get that broken off bolt out of that rest piece, so happy with that. Didn't have to drill it out, so good to go there. Let that cool down a bit, clean it up, and we'll figure out what we're going to do for that bottom felt piece. Alright, here's that door bottom rest now sort of looking a bit better. So we did scrub it up and paint it, and we've got a new piece of material in there with the old rivets. This is just a piece of Scotch-Brite, gray Scotch-Brite pad that we've tripled up and riveted it back in there, and I think that's going to work in the long term. It's definitely better than what was in there, so we'll do the other one and call this job done. Alright guys, I think we're on to the next step, which is the assembly of the doors. I think I'm going to start with the passenger side door first, as it's a little bit easier than the driver's side door, as I don't have to deal with the mirror on the passenger side door like I do on the driver's side door. So that's another little step we're going to have to get to in the future. So what I'm going to do first though is I'm going to go inside, I'm going to download this memory card off this camera. I've only got 4 minutes left. So I want to make sure I capture some of the detail that goes into assembling the doors. I have a feeling that's going to be a fairly long video on its own. So let's get ready and clean this camera up, and then we'll get back out here after we do that. See you then. And I can just hear my mom in the background talking to my dad saying, "Hey Gary, aren't those our patio cushions?" Sorry Mom, but they're coming in handy for assembling the doors.